Good morning. So I've been doing a lot of reflecting in the past few years. I hear that's a byproduct of age. But the question I've been asking myself is, how will I be remembered? When my funeral comes along, what will people say about me? And it's actually a really hard question to answer about yourself. But, I'm a pretty persistent person, so I tried anyways. And I've really spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I came up with things like, he was fun, he made me laugh, he was relaxed, kind of a laid-back guy. I'm sure many of you are thinking like flip-flops, bacon, Dodgers, Raiders, Lakers, things like that. And none of those things are bad, although some of you might disagree. None of those things are bad, but I was just overwhelmed with this feeling that those are good things, but they all just fall short. And I understand it's good to be liked, but I don't want to be remembered for being likable. I want my life to be marked by Jesus, that I loved him, that I served him, and that I helped others to love and serve him. And so a phrase just came to my mind as I was processing this, and how do I want to be remembered? And it goes something like this. He was fun, but serious about Jesus. He was likable, but serious about Jesus. He was pretty laid back, but serious about Jesus. He was, fill in any blank that you want, as long as it's kind. We're being kind to me, but fill in the blank. He was this, but he was serious about Jesus. And so the older I get, the more serious I get about Christmas. And it's not because I'm Scrooge-like, but it's really birthed from feeling the weight and the need this time of year. And so I found myself being much more thoughtful about the meaning and purpose of Christmas. Many of you know that we have a school that meets here in our facilities. They're here on Thursdays. It's a homeschool group, so they're here one day a week. And it's actually a really great school. They have a wonderful staff. Many of them are Christians. Many of the families are Christians as well. And so in that, there was this hope that they could have some sort of Christmas program. And there was just some excitement about that because it's become increasingly rare to be able to do that in the public school system. And unfortunately, there were some families within the school that weren't really comfortable with the religious implications of Christmas. And so they changed the program to a winter program. And so the school is a public school, and they receive public funding. And so as you can imagine, it was critical for them to respond to this need the way that they did. So this is not meant to be any type of critique of the school. It's actually not meant to be any type of critique of the families either, but I was thinking about this, and it made me wonder, if you don't have Christ at Christmas, what do you have left? And as I reflect on this time of year, I can't help but wonder, why? In light of the need of the world, are we trying to push out the solutions? There's this kind of psychological angst in our culture that thinks that if we bring Christ into Christmas, that we're going to somehow unleash this conflict, which is sad. Because if you know the mission of Jesus, his mission was just the opposite. If you truly understand the mission of Jesus, you know that he came to deal with the conflict that already exists in the world. Jesus is the solution to the brokenness our world is facing. And so I've come to the conclusion that it is insufficient to take Christmas lightly and to sing songs about the weather. It just doesn't work for me. And so I want to start this morning out just somewhat heavy. I want to look at some photos just from the last 6 weeks or so to show us the state of the world that we live in. And I just want to walk through this, and as we look at these photos, I want us to ask the question, should we be taking Christmas more seriously, or should we be singing songs about the weather? So here's a few photos. Photo number 1. You have smoke and flames rising after an Israeli airstrike of a 5-story building in the Gaza Strip. Next photo. Flowers placed at a makeshift memorial outside the Tree of Life synagogue, where 11 people were killed while worshiping at the end of October. Photo 3, we have California fires, where last I had heard, there were 88 dead and over 14,000 homes burned to the ground. Next picture, the results of that fire. Creation is groaning. Next, we had the midterm elections, and I know that all of you are just missing those commercials, all the political commercials. Talk about the gift you long for, political commercials. Yes, everyone's with me? No. But this leads us to people who love the president, and then you've got people who don't. Next, we have protesters wearing yellow vests to protest against high fuel prices as they're driven back by police in Belgium. And finally, the sad irony of a female Turkish riot police officer clashing with women's rights activists as they march to protest against gender violence on the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So I don't want to sing about chestnuts and open fires. I don't care if it's cold outside, baby, even if everyone else seems to be freaking out about it. I don't care if Rudolph has a shiny nose, if Frosty is a holly jolly soul, or if you have a holly jolly Christmas. I find it sad that these are the songs of Christmas. And I can't speak for you, but for me, this kind of snuck up on me. I wasn't really aware of this. Till recently, I was listening to a playlist on Spotify, and it was called Christmas Classics. And so I thought, this is going to be great stuff. And actually, these were the kinds of songs that it played. And to be truthful, I actually like these songs. There is a certain nostalgia that many of them bring, and it kind of reminds me of Christmas and the arrival of Christmas. And so I didn't really give it a second thought. But then I realized that not one of them has a thing to do about Jesus. You see, Christians care about this time of year because we believe that our world is actually groaning, that it's aching, that it is crying out for someone to fix it. And so I want us to take Christmas seriously. I want us to sing songs that go like this: long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared, and the soul felt its worth. Truly, he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. See, for Christians, the reason that we get so frustrated when Christmas is secularized is because the secular answers are so insufficient for the pain of our world. And we believe that the gospel is actually good news, that it's the thing that our world is aching for. It's the gift we long for. Christmas is a reminder of God's insertion into humanity, where he says he's going to do something about the state of the world. Luke chapter 2 says, I bring you good news of great joy for all the people. And that is our declaration that God has stepped into human history, and it is good news. And so I want to take Christmas with a spirit of joy. But I want to take Christmas seriously because we live in serious times. So last week, we looked at the prophecy of this unusual birth that was to take place, this child called Emmanuel. And as the book of Isaiah continues, we're introduced to the one called the servant. And everyone in expectation is asking the question, who is this servant? And what is he going to do? And so this passage actually answers that second question. It serves as perhaps the clearest job description about what the Lord's Messiah, the servant, will do in his life. And so I love this passage because honestly, I'm not sure there's a clearer expectation of the gift we should long for and should be seeing in the world than this passage here in Isaiah 61. So I have two takeaways from this passage. The first is that we are recipients of serious joy. The mission of Jesus, according to this passage, is a mission of jubilee. The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He's sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. So this is meant to point us to the alternative economy of the children of Israel. So you see, in Israel, there was meant to be no permanent slavery or poverty amongst them. This was meant to be one of the signs that they were the people of God, that they were set apart. The land belonged to God, and the children of Israel were just temporary stewards of it. And they were called to have a generous and just society. And so in that, every 50th year, they would take the whole year off. They would cancel all debts and return all land to its original owners. And this was called the year of Jubilee. So once every 50th year, it was a fresh start. Everyone got back to zero. There are no winners. There are no losers. And they were stewards of God's kindness. And so this was meant to be a justice reset for their culture. Now, as far as we can tell, the children of Israel never actually practiced this. But when Jesus showed up, he made this very strange declaration. In his very first sermon, it's found in Luke chapter 4, he quotes this very specific passage from the book of Isaiah. This was his manifesto. And so for all those wondering, who is Jesus? Who is the Messiah? What is he going to do? Jesus steps onto the scene and he takes this prophecy from the book of Isaiah and he says, today, this scripture has been fulfilled. That's why I'm here. And so Jesus says that his ministry is going to be framed as a ministry of serious joy, a ministry of jubilee. This was not just a year of jubilee. This is a permanent culture of jubilee when the kingdom of heaven comes. And so Jubilee is a theme of the kingdom of heaven. And he makes these extraordinary promises that he's going to bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim freedom for the captive, release the prisoners from darkness, that he's going to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And this is what we see in the ministry of Jesus. He shows love towards the sexual minorities and outcasts of his day. He's incredibly gracious to those who are caught in sexual sin. You look at his interactions with the woman at the well or the woman caught in adultery. He loved sinners and invited them to be disciples. He went to parties. He healed the sick. He cast out demons. He proclaimed the year of the Lord's favor. He transformed a tax collector into a disciple, a prostitute into a saint, and a skeptic into an apostle. Jesus came to announce good news. And so if your heart is broken, if you're in bondage, if you need to be set free, this is the message of Christmas. That there is serious joy available to you in Jesus Christ. Now, at this point in history, the children of Israel, they've had a horrible time. They're facing exile, facing judgment from pagan nations. They were impoverished, heartbroken. And so in their own internal cultural narrative, they believed that this is the end. They basically thought our nation is dying and they're preparing for a funeral. And so if you listen to the language here, this is what he says. He says, I want to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. So this language here is funeral language. And in some sense, the people of Israel viewed themselves as headed towards their own death, headed towards their own funeral. And so they're in mourning. They've covered themselves in ashes and dust. They have a garment of heaviness because they think that God has abandoned us and we're about to die. And so this prophet comes, as they're dressed for their own funeral, they're headed out the door, and they think that they're going to die. He shows up and he says, wrong event. The Messiah is coming. You're not going to your funeral. You're actually going to your wedding. You've got the wrong information. God has not abandoned you. God is going to redeem you. And so you get this beautiful poetic scene of this woman, the Dame of Zion is what one commentator put it, who has to run back into the house. She has to wash the ashes and the dust off of her face. She needs to take off these clothes of heaviness, the black outfit, if you would, and she has to get redressed and prepared for her wedding. I want you to see this image as you're walking out the door. You're expecting that you are going to your own funeral. And instead, you have to turn around, get ready for your wedding. I mean, what a difference. I know that many of you have heard the joke, what's the difference between a wedding and a funeral? At a funeral, they only bury one of you. I know, pretty lame joke. And here's what I'll tell you. There is not a bride in the world who would agree with the sentiment of that joke. From the perspective of the bride, the wedding day is a day filled with anticipation and excitement. This is an event of serious joy. And so for the people of Israel, it's as if they're dead. They have no hope, they have no future, but when the Messiah walks in, everything changes. In fact, it'll be like going to a wedding. And this is the compassion of Jesus. He comes to those who have no hope, to those who think they're broken. And in tenderness and kindness, he restores them. He loves them. He gives them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Our world aches for loving, gracious intervention and restoration. Serious joy. The second thing that we see here in this passage is that we are to be participants in serious restoration. We see here that the Messiah, he's changing everything. He's taking a people who are hurt and discouraged, and he offers them the gift of joy. And I don't know if you noticed this, but at the end of the third verse, the language here changes. It's no longer I will, but it becomes they will. They will be called oaks of righteousness. They will rebuild and restore the devastation of many generations. They will renew the ruined cities. Jesus isn't the one doing this. This is someone else. So who are these people? Who are they? They are the recipients of this serious joy. They're the ones to whom this servant is promised. They are us. The Messiah came to break the cycle of dysfunction and brokenness, and then these people who've been transformed from funeral death to marriage life are now given a task and a calling to be priests and ministers. And so these people who they themselves have been renewed, they now have a mission in the world. And that mission, very simply put, is to rebuild and to raise up and to repair. And as followers of Jesus, we have been entrusted to carry out his mission of restoration throughout the world. And so Christians are the ones who ask the question, where are the ruins? Where are the broken places that need to be rebuilt? Where are the desolate places that need life? We are going to show up and love the world back to life. We are meant to be priests and ministers. It doesn't say here that from those people I will raise up a group of pastors and ministers and priests. No, it says if you have benefited in this exchange, if you have been the recipient of life rather than death, of light rather than darkness, in freedom rather than prison, you are called to be a priest. You are called to be a minister. And so the church is filled with priests and pastors and ministers, and they aren't called church staff. The Apostle Peter said, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light." See, Jesus has come to bring restoration, and he has raised up a people to do it. And we are those people. We are chosen to be priests. We're set apart by God to do a great work, to declare the praises of him who took us out of darkness and instead gave us this wonderful, marvelous, incredible light. The church, in all of its imperfections, is the means by which God has chosen to carry out his mission here on the earth. And so we as a church are called to rise up and build. And this is why we will literally, over the course of this week, have thousands of parents, grandparents, and guardians in our building. People who are in the margins, who maybe they've lost their jobs. Maybe they're just facing incredible medical challenges. That they can't afford Christmas gifts for their children, and so they come here. And it's through a partnership with the Action Center and our willingness to love these people to life that they're going to have gifts under the tree for their children. This is why our food bank, through partnership with local organizations like Safeway and the Colorado Taekwondo Institute next year, this is why we were able to help 130 families with Thanksgiving meals this last month. This is why we tutor 17 kids at Green Mountain Elementary School every week and just tutor them in math and reading, so that we can show them the love of Jesus in our actions, and then also through sharing God's word with them. We can't do everything, but we can do something. We can find the broken places and rise up and build. We can find the old ruins and bring restoration. We can rebuild generations of devastation. And so we're in the midst of our Rise Up and Build campaign. And so we have an opportunity to do just that here at Faith Mountain, to invest in bringing restoration to a broken world. And at our family meeting, I shared that we're in a new season of ministry here at the church, and that we want to be a church that's for the saved to reach the lost, that it's a place for us to be able to worship God together, to be equipped, and then go out into the world. That we would return to financial sustainability. We know that we've had financial challenges over the last year or two, and that we would be a people engaged in the mission of Jesus. And see, Isaiah 61 here is not just the job description of the Messiah. This is actually the job description for us. To be a people that go out into the broken places, to be a people who are engaged in the mission of Jesus. And so today is an opportunity for us to do just that, to be a people who rise up and build. And so we can make an investment in what God is doing here and continue to go into the broken places so that we can actually go into even more of the broken places. It's an opportunity for us to engage in the mission of Jesus, to be a church that's filled with serious joy and participating in serious restoration, because our world is broken.